Now I want to populate the severity column. Same as what I did with the plugin text column. I want every plugin ID to have the same severity. So for example, 945-200, if I give it a severity of medium, then every 945-200 should have a severity of medium. The code will look very close to what we had with the plugin text, but there will be some variations. So same as what we did before, let's break this down into chunks. So if cells J2 equals vulnerability number populates column B, then cells J3 populates column C. I've put a severity variable in there because I know I'm going to want to have it change later. And then let's just give it, ignore what you see here. We're going to talk about this later. But let's just give it a critical, okay? All right. So what this is saying is I'm creating a variable called severity, and I'm saying that this variable is critical. And then I'm saying put this critical variable in column C. So when it's doing this whole loop that we did in the last video, and it's putting vulnerability 1 in column B, in column C, it's going to be putting the variable associated with severity, and in this case, it's critical. So let's run this, and everything should be critical. You see, every single thing is critical, right? So it's working, right? But of course, we don't want everything to be critical. We want it to be either low, medium, high, or critical. So in order to do that, I want it to be able to randomly select based on the plugin ID, either a low, a medium, a high, or a critical. So what I did is I introduced a new concept. It's called an array. You can think about it as like a list that holds information. So the first thing you do when you create this list is you have to define it. So I've defined the list as severity list. I gave it a name and I called it severity list. That's what this DIM severity list means. Then I listed how many items I'm going to store in that list. It's going to be 0 to 3. So I'm going to store 4 items, including 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. And then what am I going to store in there? I'm going to store a string. So a string is words, and like I could also say I'm going to store a number. But I'm going to store a string. And then I go ahead and store the strings in the list. So in row 0, I store a low. In row 1, I store a medium. In row 2, I store a high. And in row 3, I store a critical. I did it like this because I want to be able to randomly pick either of these, right? So I could replace these numbers here, 0, 1, 2, 3, with variables. So for example, so if I say severity list X, where X is equal to 1, then it will give me a medium. But if X is equal to 3, it'll give me a critical. If X is equal to 0, it will give me a low. So all I have to do is find a way to randomly generate X so that I can randomly get different values for high, medium, low, and critical. And I already know how to do this because we showed you how to do this in the earlier video. You can use the rand command, the random number generator. So random number generator generates a random number between 0 and 1. If I multiply it by 4, then it generates a random number between 0 and 4. And if I use the int function in front of it, then it gets rid of the decimals and it rounds it down to a full integer, right? So now this command, severity list with this random, it will generate a random number between 0 and 4. So it will either be severity, the first, if I could run it one time, it'll give me severity 0, which would be a low. I could run it again, it will give me severity 3, which would be a critical, and so on and so forth. So let's run this test and see. So I run it now. Everything's a low. Okay, let's go back. Let's run it again. Let's see if it changes. Everything's a medium. We've almost finished, but now, similar to what we did with the vulnerability plugin text, I want this number to change every time there's a new plugin ID, right? So all I have to do is come down to the place where I did the increment for the number, and I'll do something similar for severity. What I'm essentially saying is every time you finish checking for one plugin ID and you're about to start the next one, generate a brand new severity. And that's what this is doing. So if I run this script, I get a bunch of different severities. And they should all be the same for the same plugin text. There you go. Next, let's look at IP addresses and first discovered date. Okay, at this point, we have all the knowledge to do the rest of the data. We know about loops, we know about variables, we know about incrementing loops, we know about random number generators. That's all we need at this point to keep going. So let's quickly do the IP addresses. When we're looping through, we've got to put something in column D. So that's going to be the number 4. This time, I'm going to put in the IP address. So IP addresses are usually like 3-digit number followed by a dot in 4 different quadrants. So it's usually something like 123.456.789.xxx, right? So I'm going to introduce the variation with that final XXX, whatever that will be. I'm going to use a random number generator to generate that. All right. So that could be anything. But I'm just going to copy, what we saw before, this int 4 times random. This time I'm going to do 100 times random. Because I want a random number between 0 and 100. Right? So what this will do is when it puts vulnerability 1 here and it puts the severity high, critical, or medium here it will put a number that's 123.456.789.99 or .0 or .15 or .98, right? It's going to give me a random number for the last 3 digits of this IP address, which is what I want. So let me run that. Okay, so let's come back and check it out. All right, now we've got all our IP addresses. See, that was pretty straightforward. So before we discuss dates, there is one concept I have to talk about concerning how Excel stores dates. Now, if you were to look at a date, let's say November 28th, 1990. Looks pretty straightforward. But now, Excel actually stores this date as a sequential serial number. And I'll show you that. So if I come to Format and click on General, you see the number 33205. So what is that? Well, Excel stores dates as sequential serial numbers in order to be able to do calculations with them. So I think the very first serial number is January 1st, 1990, I believe. So let's check that out. January 1st, 1990. And let me copy the format from here to here. We've learned that if you've been watching this course, all I have to do is click here, click on the format painter, and then come here. All right, so it's, what did I do, 1990? No, January 1st, 1900. All right, let's do that again. Click here, get the format painter, click here, and there you see. January 1st, 1900 is 1. All right? And so it sequentially goes up every day. And that's how Excel does it. So keep that in mind. And that's all we need to remember when we're doing the date, right? It does it sequentially so you can do calculations. So this one should be easy. It's going to be very similar to what we did before. I'm going to add one more. This time I'm going to call it, it's going to go to row 5, which is column E. I'm going to create a variable called myDate. And up here at the top somewhere, I'm going to define my date as, I don't know, let me define it as today's date. I'm going to define it from 44179. So put the date 44179 when you find the first plugin ID. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted to go down to a previous date, right? So I do my date -1. This is how I'm going to make a change. So if it looks at 44179 for this plugin ID, then it's going to look at 44178 for the next plugin ID. That's how I'm going to make the dates different. It's just random. Doesn't matter, but I'm just showing you similar techniques, but this time I'm showing you can go down, you could decrement, or you can increment, right? So let's run this and see. And there you go. We've populated all the dates. Let me just put it in date format. So click on this. Click on column E, right click, go to format cells, then go to the date field, click OK, and now we have all dates here. So this is how we populated this Excel sheet with dummy data for vulnerability analysis. There's just one more thing I showed you in the beginning, and I want to show you right now. And that is introducing a button so that you can push the button here, and it will generate all this code. So go to the Developer tab, go to Insert, and then see this little button here, click on it, and then you come out here and you sort of draw the button. Just drag your mouse, and then you select which code it should be associated with. In our case, it's dummy data. Remember, we defined it as sub dummy data, right? So click OK. And now our code is associated with this button, right? So if I were to go ahead and delete all these things I just did now, I should be able to just click on the button and it will regenerate it again. There you go. And that's how you use VBA to automate processes in Excel.